So in this video, we're going to be talking about what I like to refer to as the messenger example. This is why we have private variables and how private variables can leave a class. So when I first introduce you to private variables, I tell you the definition that a private variable is not allowed to leave the class it exists in. So in the program you're going to see next, animal client, we will have these private variables that define an animal, a species, a name, a sound, an age, and a weight. Now you should know that these variables are private, right? Meaning they are not allowed to leave the class. They cannot leave this class. But animal demo needs to access them. I need to be able to do something like print name. But name is private inside of here. It can't be accessed inside of another class. But it has to be. But it can't because it's private, right? The whole idea behind a private variable is that it cannot leave a class. It can't be accessed from another class. So how do we allow this to happen, and why don't we allow this to happen? So the reason we don't allow this to happen is if you think about a bank account, right? So if you think about your bank account, let me pull up Paint here, very high tech, right? If I have a bank account of $100, and I go to my bank and it says, okay, how much money do you have? And I just say, oh, I actually have $1 million. And they're like, okay, well, no. That's because when you go to online banking, you have $100, that's in your bank. You cannot change that to say you have $1 million because your variable that references your money is a private variable. If it was public, if you were able to access it yourself, you could change it to whatever amount you would like. That'd be nice, but we can't do that, right? Because that is a private variable. You don't want a user to be able to go and tell you how much money they have. You can't trust them in that sense. Now, in the programs we're writing, it doesn't really matter if we can trust the user or not. What they're going to do, say my cat is a dog, it doesn't really affect me. But it's a good habit to build and understanding to have. So, to allow this to happen, I do demonstrate something called the messenger example. So usually I use myself as an example. We will say that this guy right here is me. So I am here, and I have a very important message that I have to deliver. But, so here's my message. I have a very important message I have to deliver. The problem is, my message is private. And I'm stuck inside of this little room that is a private room. I'm not allowed to leave. Message can't be changed. I'm not allowed to leave this room. Okay? So I need to deliver this message to, let's say, Sally, who is down here. I need to deliver my message right here to Sally. But I physically cannot leave the constraints of this room. I'm stuck inside of it. It's a private room. I'm a private variable. So how can I deliver my message if I can't leave the room? Well, what we can do is we can create setters and getters, which is what you've been seeing, what we've seen in our example, or you will see an example. We saw a setter and a getter. A setter allows you to take your private variable, which in our case would be species, and assign it to a public variable. So we take our private, which can be accessed in this class, and we don't give it to the other class. We create a copy of that variable. So private species equals public spec, creating a copy, and then we return it. So in this analogy or this example here, what we can do is we can say we have this other person here, we'll call Tom. Tom is a public method, he's our setter, and because he's public, he can access things inside of our class and outside of our class. Okay? Because Tom is public, he can access things inside and outside. So what we're going to do is we're going to say Tom is going to come inside of my class like this. I'm going to make him a lot smaller so I don't mess up the walls or anything. You can come inside of the class and I can say, okay, you're inside of the class so I can share information with you. So what I can do is I can generate a copy of my message. Here's a copy of my message. Not the message itself, but here's a copy, which is what the private species equals spec does. It creates a copy. So we generated a copy of my message to Tom. I think that's what I called him, because he's inside of my class. He can see my message. I give him a copy of the message. Because he's public, he can leave the class and he can come down here and he can deliver that message to Sally. just like that. Now, what would happen here if Tom decided to change the message? So let's say he delivers the message to Sally, but he accidentally, or maybe not accidentally, he purposefully draws on it. So we can just grab a pen and we can say that he just scribbles all over the message. Well, if he scribbles all over the message or changes it to whatever he wants, doesn't really matter to me because my message is still intact, right? That private variable up here cannot leave the class. What I gave to Tom was a copy of the private variable, not the private variable itself. So even if he changes it, he only changed the copy, he didn't change the original. The original remains intact. And that is the power of accessor methods or mutator methods or setters and getters, however you want to refer to them. The private will always remain intact and can never leave the class. We instead allow it to leave the class through the use of public methods which take clones or copies of these variables, not the variables themselves. So this is what I like to call the messenger example, and you can see that he did deliver the message successfully. So his job is done, everyone has done their part, the private message is intact, Sally got the message, and Tom did the job. So that is the analogy of the messenger example and why we use mutator methods.